night making a video. Yeah, it's Hythloday's response to Logic Rolls the Dice, and I figure it looks like I listened to this video anyway. I might as well throw in my 2 cents. So look, he's finally gotten to a picture here. You know, the beginning was just nothing. 8 minutes of nothing. So now he's values. So he's either using the word values or using the word valuer or to who. He's always trying to turn the idea of value into not something we describe, the reality of value, instead that we project some sort of value on a thing. So I don't want to go through all the examples, but yeah, I mean, you know, from his description, if humans didn't show up to call gravity gravity, there'd be no gravity. You know, if humans didn't show up to sit there and label things, concepts that existed, they wouldn't exist. Now, before humans, there was sentience on planet Earth. And it seems obvious that there were value states being endured by the sentient creatures. There were horrible things happening. And blissful moments. These valuable circumstances were taking place. They existed. There was no human to project their little finger on it and say, I'm projecting value. I now declare it to mean something. It meant something in and of itself. The experience of the conscious state is in itself intrinsically, fundamentally valuable. I've explained that if you take sentient welfare, if you take the capacity to hurt something out of the universe, now you have a universe where nothing can be harmed, nothing can experience a negative sensation. It becomes obviously ludicrous to think anything could possibly matter, that there could be a better outcome or a worse outcome if there's no sentient to be in some degraded conscious state. If it's all just some announcement like, "Ooh, that is poopy." Well, poopy doesn't mean anything. You know, if it doesn't have a sentient welfare tied to it, it can't possibly mean anything. And all I have to do is put one sentient creature on one planet in the universe, and I've created a welfare state that now matters. It matters what happens to that sensitive creature. I just don't know how that can be argued with reasonably, rationally, logically. It's the root of all value, is the capacity for a sentient to endure some sort of negative state of conscious experience. Yeah, well, that's enough. I won't beat it to death. Well, maybe I will beat it to death, because it apparently has to be beaten to death. If it was a game, let's say, so let's look at the perception here. I mean, for him, this is all just some sort of gameplay with words. But let's say if this is life. If you saw life in the universe, I've done this before, but yeah, okay, you're traveling through the universe. You're perfectly comfortable all the time, and your mission is basically just to see if something's really broken and fix it. You know, if there's a leaky pipe somewhere, you'll fix it. Whatever, you just fix things because that's what you do. You're intelligent. So you come across a planet with a bunch of organisms on it, eating each other, and doing this survival thing. And so yes, they're fornicating and having some fun, but most of the time they're eking out existences, desperately competing with each other for survival. And there's huge attrition numbers, hundreds to 1. 100 get wiped out for the 1 to survive, kind of ratios for most of the organisms. So just plot that in some sort of personal way. So if you were to have kids, would you let your kids play a game where the attrition numbers were that high, where you were going to wipe out 20 of your kids to have 1 survive this little competition you're going to have them play? Or would you have your kid go into a neighborhood contest with the neighbor kids with odds of 100 to 1? 100 to 1 odds, your kid's going to, 99 to 1. And that your kid's going to get killed in the contest. Would you send him to play that kind of Russian roulette? You'd say that's an appropriate game for my children to play? No. It's not an appropriate game for anything sentient to play. It's a game for something less than a bug. Not even bugs shouldn't have to endure the hardship of this kind of brutal game. It's brutal, stupid, inefficient, nasty business. It's a bad game, and nothing should be playing it that can feel. Anyway, I'll play another 8 minutes or so with this, see how far I get before further commentary is necessary. Alright, up to 14 minutes, and again you can still see it coming. Valued by sentience. So again, this valued word, as if something needs to value it for it to have value. States valued. Again, it is not dependent on us valuing it. We don't have to see gravity to know gravity exists. I don't have to look for it. I don't have to find it. It's there. We know it. It's a truth. And the fact that sentient experience has value, not valued. Again, still valued by individuals. Whether the individual experiencing suffering or pleasure understands even what they're experiencing is not relevant. You could have somebody in a mental hospital tormented, and they might not have the cognitive ability to even understand they are in a mental hospital and that they are tormented. Their torment would still be something that existed. The negative sensations, the fear, the horror, the terror, these emotions would still exist. It's not about somebody saying, I'm valuing now. I am having a value experience. They don't have to declare it. It's something that we know exists when they have the experience. It doesn't need a declarative statement. It doesn't need acknowledgement in any other sense that we acknowledge it when we're going to talk about its meaning, its relevancy. But again, it doesn't need this is, you go back to the stupid tree falling in the forest thing. The tree falls. The air is disrupted by the process. The sound vibrations travel. It's just true. This stuff all happens without us observing it, without us valuing it. The value is intrinsic to the existence of sentients that are capable of experiencing sensations that have qualitative character. The sensations have the qualitative character. Not the perceiver of the sensations, not the judger of the sensations, no. The experience of the sensation is intrinsically and fundamentally, by its very nature, qualitative. That's part of its identification. That's what makes it possible to call it sentient, is that it's having an experience that is qualitative. So anyway, yeah, so I mean, it's just going to keep coming down to this. It's going to keep trying to turn this into a value designation game rather than a value description game. Reality is what we're making it, rather than reality is what we're attempting to discover. Again, it's a discovery of the truth of the nature of the game we're playing. The nature of the game is that sentient organisms will experience sensations, and that we have to account for the torturous sensations with some sort of value in these satisfied desires. We don't do anything else, much else, besides satisfying desires. So we have to come up with some desire satisfaction that we can rationally or reasonably say is worth the extensive torture that takes place in acquiring them. So we're back to the, if it is accurate to say it is a gladiator war and many soldiers will die, many good gladiators will be destroyed and harmed and brutalized in the process of this game we're playing, that it would be quite obvious to say the victory is shallow, is empty, is meaningless, because the price paid for it is just preposterously and insanely too high. There's not enough value in the gratified, satisfied ambition of victory, in the sense that too many spectators were killed. There's that way, another way to analogize it. It's a road race or something, and you've killed thousands of spectators. Was the spectacle worth it? Was the fun worth it? The argument is no. You can't make any of it worth it. The worst of the torture is so bad that it just cannot. There's nothing you can produce in terms of a satisfied desire to say your satisfied desire didn't need to exist in the first place, your desire, and its gratification just can't justify the amount of pain being endured. Yeah, I mean, it gets even worse. I mean, if you're really fair to the conversation, it gets even worse in the sense that, you know, there is no positive value. All you're doing is satisfying negative, you know, deprivations. Negative conditions are created. You have to resolve the negative condition by enduring some process. Those process creates more negative conditions in other organisms. It's just totally defeative. It's you know, you're paying to pay back a debt. You're incurring 10 times more debt. It doesn't make any sense. It's illogical. Okay. Continue later. I'll go cut grass or something. Oh, geez, it really is pathetic. Anyway, 1940. So he's getting to this now. Now, you know, the bad and intrinsically bad. So somehow he thinks there's two different kinds. So, you know, if you did this kind of evaluation on any other subject, like nuclear power plants, by using his kind of crooked logic, you could just say, well, the bad only happens to a few people who get irradiated and killed or get thrown off their property. So it's okay. So as long as the number of people harmed is somehow less than the number of people who are not harmed, that somehow it's okay because it's only bad to the victims. And if you're not a victim, then you don't have any reason to worry about the victims you made. So, yeah, you know, it's the slave argument. You could make a million arguments how this just doesn't work. This is not logical. You can't just say, okay, it's bad, but it's bad only because he thinks it's bad. It's not fundamentally bad when somebody's in pain or suffering or thrown off their land. It's bad, period. It's a bad thing that happened. It's not just bad to the person who's enduring the suffering of it. It's bad as an event, period. It's bad as an event in the universe. It happened in the universe. It didn't just happen in him. It happened in the universe, in the game. It's a cost of the game. So again, I can just use the store analogy. I could use any kind of analogy and just say, if this is the real pricing, okay? You can't go in and say, well, let's just ignore how much it costs, and we'll just take the stuff, and all we'll consider is how much happiness it gives us, and we won't consider the victims because they're not intrinsically real. They only exist if we pay attention, or something like that. I mean, it's just an evasion of accountability. You're just saying it's okay not to account for it because it's somehow not intrinsic. It's only in their brain, and therefore I don't have to consider it. It's only bad in their brain. It's not bad as an event. It's not bad as an event in the universe. Again, an event in the universe. An event that's part of the game. If it was if it was like a racetrack and one of the cars flies off the track and careens into the crowd, it's now part of the cost of having the race, is the dead spectators. You have to account for it as a part of the cost. It's not just happened to them, it happened to the event. Now the event has to account for the damage done. The event of life on Earth has to account for all of the expenses. It can't just say that expense is only their expense. Nobody else had to expend that expense, so therefore we're not going to count it. It didn't cost me anything, so everything's fine. No. That's not logical. It's just insane. Really, I mean, bad and good are intrinsic words by their nature. You don't use them in any other context but as an absolute statement. They just don't have any applicability in some sort of, I don't really mean it sense. They're meaningful words, not unmeaningful. Alright, just the same old dodge. So he's basically saying, because you can harm things without personally being harmed by harming things, then you can logically say there's no victims. As long as you're not a victim, there's no victims. So you can kill people drunk driving, you could make defective automobiles, you can make poisonous food, you can do whatever you want, and you've committed no value crime. You can be called a productive human being even if, you kill 1 million people with poisonous food in China or something. You can still call yourself productive and get away with it, like somehow you're logical. So you poison, torture, and the people die slowly for a couple of weeks because it didn't hurt you. There's no crime. There's no reason you have to account for the victims. You just keep saying it over and over again, that somehow you're not allowed to say, no, the inclusion of the victims is intrinsic to the value equation. You can't extract it from the price tag of the thing you're talking about. The thing we're talking about is life. We're talking about the prevention of harm, a word you never use, but is clearly the obvious, rational approach to correcting a bad is to prevent it. It's the number one answer to how do we fix this problem? Prevent it. Yeah, number one answer. Now obviously you can't prevent what's already happening, but you can prevent it happening again in the future. So again, if it's a reoccurring problem, the number one answer to the correct answer for what do you do about it is prevent it. So this conversation is inane. He wouldn't apply these rules to a discussion about any other event that takes place in human activity. Would he apply this standard and say, oh no, it's okay, make cheap airplanes and have them fall down on people and all that kind of shit and kill passengers and whatnot? It doesn't matter as long as you, as the owner of the company, are comfortable and happy. No harm. The victims don't count. You don't have to account for victims. What logic is there in accounting when you go to see whether you've done something productive or not? What sense would it make to account for the victims you created? The harm done to the victims, the bad you created in the world. Not right. I mean, really. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's below the minimum standard required to have a rational conversation. It's an irrational conversation when you're going to say it is not obvious that you have to account for the price of something when you're going to create it or purchase it, as an analogy. That price of what you're getting isn't relevant. Of course it's relevant. It's the most relevant factor is the cost in bad. We've already been down this road. I mean, so again, just going to keep pretending that the commerce of our lives is not in this exchange of comfort, that we compromise other things' comfort for our own comfort. That's the value exchange. And that the currency, the negative price you pay, the tax, is suffering, and the profit is your gratification. That's the economy we exist in. That's the premise, the axiom, the truth. Alright, almost done. I guess I should have just played the ending. I guess I should have finished it. But I'll do, maybe I'll do the second half of the video. I didn't finish before. He's just, again, he's not accepting the economy metaphor. So, he talks all this talk about recognizing negative numbers and positive numbers, but he doesn't accept any of it. He's not accepting the economy, that it's fundamental if you're rational. The rational imperative in the economy is you don't spend more money for something than it's worth. That's stupid. So that's the logical imperative, is not to pay more than you have to for something. You pay less than. You try to reduce how much something costs, even to produce. You don't produce something trying to produce something that costs more than it needs to cost. So the logic is built into the value of the currency. And again, the currency here is the sentient welfare state. It's bad for sentience to suffer. It's good for sentience to be comfortable. So these are the value that's being exchanged. You're exchanging discomfort for comfort. And you have to do it within this economy that says you can't spend too much for something, because then you've broken the equation. You've made a car that doesn't get enough miles through the gallon, kind of thing. It's not sufficiently efficient. And that's what's at issue here, is the recognition of the insufficiency of the efficiency of something, and that's the logical imperative. It's broken. The logical imperative is to fix it, because the brokenness is meaningful. It's not irrelevantly broken, it's not casually broken, it's not benignly broken, it's maliciously broken, it's malignantly broken, it requires repair, or there will be a leakage of value. Blood will leak out. It's that obvious a negative. How else to put it? Yeah, but if you're not going to accept the meaning of the word value, which is it creates a currency, an exchange rate. This is the fundamental nature of it. And the designation, the logical imperative, is to run a profit, not a loss. You can't high jump by digging holes in the ground. It's just part of the definition of the thing, the obligation, once you establish that the game has goals and the game has ways of losing, that you can win or lose, that you can spend too much or pay the right price, get a bargain. Yeah, no point. Yeah. No, I'm not missing much there. Playing Logic Guy's video.
Whoa. Better for humanity if the Martians do so. Well, it's better for... You've changed the scope of what you're talking about.
Oh, no. I've not changed the scope. We're talking... You've been talking about sentience all along. Are not feeling sentient Martians, aliens, contained within this set of all sentience? Any more than I could say we live on an island? How is it the suffering of the Africans impinges on me? If you consider a humanity to be...
Right, right. So this is what he thinks is a winning argument. So he's basically, again, just conceding. He thinks he can cause victims, and he doesn't have to account for them. As long as he's comfortable, everything's fine. The thing being done, the event, the exchange, was fair as long as he won. you know, there's no such thing as a loss as long as the pain and the suffering is imposed on somebody else. It just doesn't make any sense. We're not playing that game. We're playing a game that you have to include all the costs in. The economy is not your economy. The economy is the entire economy. You can't be productive by being destructive. You can't be productive by being destructive. And destructive doesn't just happen to you. I don't know. I mean, this is just too insane.
Wiped out, you know, any moment at some future moment in time by, you know, some catastrophe, such that we never form a world social order. It's entirely within the scope of discussion. I don't get how you realise that objection. I see you struggling with the that it's a pointed statement that, you know, that you're struggling to deal with and remain consistent within your logic.
No, whatever. Yeah, I'm sure he's gonna love your characterization of his reaction to your changing of the words. But whatever. That's, you know, I mean, that's his deal. So anyway, this is just, as usual, just boring. So I'll get to the other video. I mean, you know, I'll be back, I guess is what I'm saying. So, I mean, but he just basically said it. He says, as long as it's not happening to me, how could I possibly have any logical imperative to be aware of victims? I can create victims with logical immunity. There's nothing illogical about causing suffering or allowing suffering to exist that you can prevent. It either is or is not bad. If it's bad, the imperative exists. Bad, broken. Yeah, bad, need fixie. Logic say fixie. Alright, so now he's yeah, you know, where I left off, he's just wasted all this time talking about consent, which is only an argument if you're going to say, okay, there's something not true. If you're the one making the argument that everybody gets to make up some sort of value bullshit. All right, that value is somehow only happens in our own one little old brain, and that's it. It's a declaration of value. It's not a discovery of value. It's not a recognition of actual value. So you're the one making that argument. So I'm just saying, to negate that argument, all I have to do is bring up consent. Okay, so if you're going to argue that you're making it up, what I'm saying is that you're made up value designations without, you know, if you're saying nothing, you're saying you can't place any higher standard. You can't say one is more logical than another. They're just all these individual selfish designations of value. So I'm saying that, well, in that atmosphere, then you're going to have consent to impose on somebody else, because you don't have the truth on your side. You don't have a rational argument on your side. You don't have logic on your side. You don't have anything to use on your side except your subjective opinion. Your subjective opinion can't be imposed on somebody else. So you're the one lacking consent. And again, you can't get consent. I'll concede the point, but the point is, when you don't have it, the standard is higher. And that's just the simple truth. When you're going to implicate other people, the standard is higher. You don't have a right to trespass. It's fundamentally a trespass to impose life. Creation is a fundamentally aggressive act. There's no way of getting around that. It's about as aggressive as you can get as an act. And you don't have a right to do it, okay, if you don't have the authority of truth behind you. If you don't have the authority of, I have the right answer, this is the correct thing to do, then you have nothing to impose with. That's the reason context consent was brought up. Because you're the one claiming that you have rights. I'm claiming you have no right to be illogical, you have no right to be unproductive, you have no right to be destructive, you have no right to be a bad person causing bad harm in the world. No such right exists. Okay? None. So I don't have to worry about any consent crap because I don't have to concede to illogic and stupidity. And that is all you have on your side.
One instance, it's a fundamental right to demand, as inmendham would say, this higher standard if we don't have consent. But then, for example, with the red button.
So he's going to keep doing it, okay? Again, I'm the one saying there is a truth, and I'm the one saying I have confidence. If, like I said, if a procreator can be honest and say they have confidence, I can prove they're irrational. All right? I can just show the statistics of what babies turn out to be, and so I can demonstrate their irrationality. If they say they're confident, it's all going to be okay. They have no right to be confident. They have no logical reason to be confident. They have no rational reason to be confident. They have nothing on their side regarding confidence in what they're doing. They're just plainly taking a risk, and they're assigning that risk to somebody else without consent. And that's the simple truth. My argument is I do have confidence, complete 100% confidence. And again, I'll argue that the fundament of my confidence is the fact that biology says it's a replicating molecule, that we're nothing but insanely stupid. We're in an insanely stupid arrangement where we're inevitably going to cause more harm than anything productive we could possibly do. And the only thing productive to do is clean up the very mess that we're part of anyway. We make a mess by existing, we create need, and the only logical thing to do is to stop the creation of need. So, you're not going to be able to unravel that. You're not going to be able to say that's not true. It is fundamentally true. We are need machines that are not needed. You can't get more fallacious or fake in terms of a non-purposeful existence, in terms of something that doesn't have any redeeming value. And of course, there's obvious visceral, actual harm. So you can't have actual harm and no productive accomplishment. You can't put gasoline in a car with no engine. You can't burn money and call yourself logical.
If he's going to press that, he has to have this higher standard. And all those people would object that his standard of assurity that he is correct is not high enough. I don't consent to you being happy to press the red button, you see.
Well, again, but whether you consent or not, what you don't have is an argument. I have an argument explaining how procreation is a silly, selfish, psychological act of absolutely no rational or logical merit, and I can demonstrate where preventing torture, unconsigned, unconsensual torture, does in fact have a rescue mission validity to it that is perfectly legitimate. You are rapists and pillagers, you are evil motherfucking cunt bastards committing unproductive acts on sentient beings, and you are properly stopped. You are properly stopped. If somebody actually did have if we actually had a game out there where you take your kids, okay, and 100 kids go in and one kid comes out, you actually had a game like that, I would take the authority and the right to say I'm going to stop that because it's totally insanely unproductive and stupid. And anybody participating in it is an asshole.
So, all those enjoyers of life, anyhow.
Yeah, again, enjoyers of life at the expense of the victims. Again, just ignore the victims. So as long as you can play this game where you don't have to account for the victims you create, oh sure, that can make sense. But your hypocrisy and your duplicity are obvious because you wouldn't want to live in a world where you're not protected from being a victim. So that makes you totally bogus.
So that would be the reply to inmendham's most recent video.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a reply. Sorry, not even close. Like I said, you won't deal with a single metaphor. You didn't even deal with what you said. You conceded that the argument of consent, and then you changed the subject to the red button again. That my argument is where's your higher standard of behavior? Where have you proven procreation to be a good act? Is there any proof of it? No. So again, it's my nest building argument. If you're going to lay eggs, you have an obligation to prove you have a satisfactory nest. This is a minimum standard. We can establish that. Is the minimum standard met? No. I mean, you know, I'm just saying that logically you have you're standing on nothing. You're standing on a disaster and a mess and a sloppery, okay, where you have imposed absolute torture and you have nothing to justify it. So you lose. You fail. And generally speaking, you suck. I mean, your brain is just a pile of suck. I mean, if you can't figure out the simple logic, again, that the badness of suffering is intrinsically bad. It does not matter whose name is on the suffering. It doesn't matter whether it's my suffering or your suffering or somebody else's suffering. It's bad suffering. A broken leg is a broken leg is a broken leg. AIDS is AIDS is AIDS is AIDS. Ebola is Ebola is Ebola is Ebola. It's all bad, 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 bad. It doesn't matter who the fuck it's happening to. It's fucking goddamn bad. And logically, it must be prevented if it's part of the game we're playing. It's not an acceptable play of the game. If the game includes Ebola, then the game's no fucking goddamn good. Jeez. Too many bad apples and there's no fucking pie to eat. Can you get something that simple? Yeah. Anyway, till next time, such. You know, I got to find somebody with a little bit better an argument than I'm going to change the rules and not have a logical conversation about rational evaluation. Rational in the sense that he would not use these silly arguments to defend poisonous food, badly manufactured airplanes. You know, dangerous cars, faulty tires, any subject I could bring up, he would not use this kind of logic to justify making victims. Anyway, enough said.